Okay, so Abdul, can I introduce you now, please?
Do you want to do that, Olivia, or do you want me to start?
Yeah, that's fine. I'll start. You go ahead.
Good afternoon on a very sunny day to all our participants and colleagues. This particular session that I'm going to deliver this afternoon is very much part of our core module that we teach on the program called Islamic History and Civilization. So towards the end of the module, we actually I actually delivered this session on the rise and fall of Islamic Spain. Also, I just want to point out before I actually start the session that this particular talk very much is going to focus on how the Muslims actually arrived in Spain, and secondly, look at the scientific, cultural, and obviously the technical advancements that the Arabs and the Muslims actually made in nearly 700 years of rule on the Iberian Peninsula. Before I start, I also want to point out that there's been a lot written in terms of the way the Jews, Christians, and Muslims actually coexisted in Spain. So what I don't want to do is I don't want to paint a picture that everything was very rosy and everything was fantastic. Yes, generally the 700 years of Islamic rule, you did have very good relations between Jews, Christians, and Muslims, but at times there were difficulties because you had periods where religious intolerance dominated certain periods of history. So I just wanted to point that out beforehand. So what I'm going to do now is going to basically start the session very much focusing on the achievements of the Arabs and the Muslims in Spain. So you have an illustration here of one of the most famous iconic landmarks in Islamic Spain, or in Spain today. So what I want to do now is I want to open up to the audience. What's your impression of this particular image that you've just seen? Yes, we have Safwan who said Alhambra Palace. Very good. Anybody else?
Can we just see the image again briefly,
yes.
Abdul?
Yes, there you go. Does anybody know the significance of the feature in the middle of the actual courtyard? Very good. We have some good responses. Very impressive, amazing, breathtaking, very peaceful. Fountain, yes. What's the significance of the lion? I'm referring to the lions just in front of the fountain. Does anyone know what the significance of those lions are, or that particular feature? I'll give you a few more moments. See if anybody knows the answer. Come on, someone must know the answer. To be honest, it is a hard question.
I don't know the answer. You tell us.
Right. So basically, these particular lions were actually constructed by a Jewish vizier at the time by the name of Ibn Nigrala. So he was the one who actually created his own home where he had these particular 12 lions that he actually had manufactured himself. So these particular lions depict the actual 12 tribes of Israel. So this basically shows that during the time of the Nasrids in the 13th century, you had Jewish viziers, which is the equivalent of a prime minister, that actually was running the affairs on behalf of the Muslim rulers in Spain. Did everybody get that? If everybody can respond in terms of, did everybody get the answer that I've just mentioned? Yep, thank you. Right. So what I'm going to do now is here you have an illustration of the actual area we're talking about in terms of as far as governance was actually concerned in terms of the territory that the Muslims act and the Arabs actually rule. So the actual area we're talking about, southeastern Spain, is referred to as Al-Andalus, for example, or is known as Andalusia, which is in the southeast of the country if we look at the area shaded in green. But generally, the actual Al-Andalus was also known as the Islamic Emirate of Granada, the Caliphate of Cordoba. So he had a lot of names throughout the 700 years, primarily because of the amount of territory that was actually controlled, which was quite substantial in the 7th century, but quite kind of dwindled down to Granada within 700 years because a lot of the land was lost to the Christians, namely the Catholic kingdom led by Ferdinand and Isabella, especially more towards 1492. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to basically provide an overview. Yes, Safwan, absolutely correct. I'm going to be talking about the Vandals. You just beaten me to it. So this particular it's very important that we actually understand the backdrop in terms of before the arrival of the Muslims and the Arabs into Spain. So if you actually look at the 3rd century, what we actually find is that the Roman Empire had very much collapsed, where a lot of the power, the money had actually shifted eastwards towards Constantinople, or what's known as modern-day Istanbul in Turkey. So what we find is that we have a fracturing of the Roman Empire where it basically disintegrates. So what happens is, especially in France, Spain, and Portugal, you have the rise of the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Franks, very much fighting it out for domination and control, especially in France, Spain, and what we now know as Portugal. So what we find is between the 3rd and the 7th century, there's a lot of infighting between the tribes, and especially further complicated by the fact that you have Alaric, for example, the head of the Germanic kingdom, launching his invasions from Germany towards France and Spain. So you have a time where there's a lot of chaos, instability, problems, very much emerging between the various tribes in Spain, which meant that for the people, was a very chaotic time, nearly 3 centuries of chaos, disorder. People couldn't actually get on with their lives simply because of the infighting. So you had basically what we would describe today as a civil war, where one tribe was actually trying to push the other tribe out. So we have an illustration here of a very famous general. Does anybody know who this famous general is in history and why he's so important? Yes, Tariq ibn Ziyad. Safan, I'm very much on the money again. Tariq ibn Ziyad. Which particular island is named after Tariq ibn Ziyad? I'll give you a clue. Yes, Gibraltar. So Gibraltar is very much a corruption of the name Tariq ibn Ziyad, or the actual mountain named after him, or Jabal al-Tariq. So we have the rock, yes, Safwan. What we have is that we have this particular island that was actually used as a staging post by Tariq ibn Ziyad, who was a Berber general at the command of Musa ibn Nusayd, who in turn was a Ummayyad governor of Spain at the behest of Al-Walid I, who was the Umayyad caliph in Damascus. So the Umayyad Empire actually stretched from Damascus all the way to Spain by at least the mid-7th century. So it was phenomenal for the Umayyads that they actually managed to create an empire that spanned 3 continents, which was, amazing, especially as far as the Islamic faith had only been literally 70 to 80 years old. So the Umayyads, amazing achievement in terms of being able to manage and control territories across 3 continents. So Jabal al-Tariq, or Gibraltar, is the island that's ruled by the British today. Very much was used as a staging post by Tariq ibn Ziyad, moving troops from North Africa all the way across the Mediterranean onto Gibraltar, then using Gibraltar as a staging post to move on to the mainland Spain, or what we would describe as southeastern Spain, namely Andalusia. So the Islamic invasion of Spain. So the Berber leader Tariqibn Ziyad. So the Berbers are very much a distinctive, have a distinctive culture, identity, language in comparison to the Arabs. So the Berbers originally came from Yemen. It is alleged by historians that 10,000 years ago, the Berbers migrated from Yemen and settled in North Africa. So the Berbers very much have their own customs, language, tradition, as I basically said, as I mentioned earlier. So very much the Umayyads initially were only managed to struggled initially to actually subdue the Berbers in North Africa, namely had to use diplomatic means or diplomacy, intermarriage, in order to actually bring the Berbers under their control. The Berbers, even though they actually adopted Arabic language customs, but nevertheless they actually maintained their cultural and linguistic identity. And even today, for example, if you go outside Marrakesh, the Atlas Mountains, you see the Berbers wearing distinctive clothing, have their own language, their customs. So they've held on to these traditions for nearly more than 10 to 12,000 years. So Tariq ibn Ziyad, he was a Berber leader. He actually landed at Gibraltar with his flotilla, and very much at the end of by about 711, very much was able to actually get his army onto mainland Spain. So what we find is Tariq ibn Ziyad was very much able to bring his troops onto mainland Spain. He also received a lot of support from people in Spain who were namely Christians, who actually, as I was saying earlier, were quite fed up at the fact that there was so much instability, chaos, civil war between the various tribes. So Tariq ibn Ziyad managed to actually get his troops onto mainland Spain for the first time in 711 AD, and was able to also muster support from Christian groups in order to be able to defeat the Visigothic king Roderick. Also, some historians have said that Musa ibn Nusayr also wanted to actually, he had his sights set on Europe and Spain. So the invasion actually came a lot earlier than what was envisaged, namely because of an incident that happened in the island of Ceuta, which is on the northern coast of Morocco, which is still a Spanish enclave or territory ruled by the Spanish even today. So there's a particular count called Julian of Ceuta. His daughter had actually allegedly been raped by Roderick. So Count Julian, he wanted to seek revenge against Roderick. But what happened was that he didn't have the firepower, the resources, the money in order to launch an invasion against the forces of Roderick and the Visigoths. So Count Julian actually enlisted the support of Musa ibn Nusayr, who actually then entrusted Tariq ibn Ziyad to actually go to war with the Visigoths. So after an 8-year campaign between 711 and 720, the Muslim forces in alliance with the Christians moved towards the northeast of Spain. So nearly 80% of Spain came under the control of the Muslims. But the actual advancement into France was very much checked by Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours in 732. So if Charles Martel had been defeated at the Battle of Tours, you would have probably seen France and even potentially the UK or England coming under threat from the forces of Tariq ibn Ziyad and the Umayyads under the governance of Musa ibn Nusayr. So a question I want to ask to our participants is, what has struck you so far?
And for this one, please, if you'd rather write in the chat, you can do, but it would be nice if we can share your responses in the recording of the session. And to do that, if you see the T at the bottom of the screen, if you click on that and then click anywhere on this slide, you can write something there. So just go to the top of the screen above where you see the slide, click on the big T, click anywhere on the slide and write your responses to Abdul's question, what has struck you so far, and then we'll be able to share those with anyone who listens into this recording afterwards. And do ask us for help in the chat if you're not sure how to do that or if it's not working.
So one of the responses we have is they were able to move overseas land very effectively. Very good point. We encourage our participants to contribute. So please, yeah, history of Alhambra and the 12 Lions. I'm going to ask for that name again. How large the area they conquered is. Excellent. Very good to know that everybody's listening. I didn't know they went up to Barcelona. Yes.
And Abdul, what was that name again for the 12 lions at the Palace of the Alhambra?
That was the courtyard of the lions, and it was the vizier Samuel ibn Nigrella who actually made those lions that he was going to use in his own property. But later, the actual rulers found out that they couldn't have a vizier having a bigger palace than the actual rulers themselves. So I think Samuel ibn Nigrella basically lost those 12 lions in a tragic manner.
Thank you for that. We're getting lots of responses now.
Yes, remembering the names again, like Tariqibn Ziyad, Julian, Roderick. Yes, Battle of Tours could have changed the development of the globe. Absolutely. William the Conqueror took England in 1066. You would have probably found Islamic forces very much controlling France and even the UK. It's a possibility if it wasn't for Charles Martel. Is this significance why Elizabeth I converted the Alhambra and Seville, their palace and Spanish court? I didn't quite understand that question. Elizabeth I was around in the 15th century. I'm led to believe was.
Does the person who asked that question want to either put it in the chat or raise their hand, and we can see if we can answer it?
I think Anna wants to ask a question. Olivia?
Anna, I think I've made you a presenter for a moment, so you should be able to unmute yourself and ask your question now. Let's see if that works. If not, we'll put it in the chat. And yes, in response to Safwan's question, recording this and we'll send you the recording. So if you miss anything, you'll get your recording.
No, sorry, I was just wondering, because the importance of the Alhambra and the symbolism, I was just thinking when Elizabeth and Ferdinand conquer Cordoba and all the south of Seville, and they basically the more way, they actually move the court, the Spanish court, to the south of Spain. So obviously, it has. It seems to me that it has a symbolism of the power that the Spanish kingdom was gaining, but I'm not really sure about the timing.
Yeah, I think I think I understand your question. Is it Anna? Yes.
Yes, it's Anna asking that
It is me.
question,
Okay.
Abdul.
Right. I think, yes, I would basically agree with that, simply because the issue was when Ferdinand and Isabella actually took over, the actual Islamic empire had roughly 60 caliphs and 60 different provinces. So basically they were mini kingdoms. So yes, Ferdinand and Isabella wanted to basically show their power and authority, and the biggest coup for them would have been to basically take over the palaces and actually use them as homes to show to the public that Islamic rulers, and we have basically got our territory back. And many rulers have done this throughout history in order to basically show their power and influence. I mean, the Ottomans did it in Constantinople when they took over the Hagia Sophia. They turned the church, a beautiful church, into a mosque, which is now a museum. So it's happened in the past. In order to show your power and influence, that the former rulers are gone and now there's a new order in place, and I don't think that would ever change. I do hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much for that
Yep.
question, Anna. That's excellent.
Yep.
Yes, and thank you for responding in the chat.
Olivia, can I move on now?
Yes, please do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, so what we have here is we have an illustration. I know it's not brilliant, very much underlining the territory ruled by the Umayyads. So the Umayyads actually ruled Spain, especially for about 250 years, from about 750 AD, after they were ousted by the Abbasids, because they were defeated at the Battle of Zab in Syria. So what we find is that the Umayyad Empire actually migrated westwards, that they actually lost a considerable amount of land. So what you actually have is that you have nearly 250 years of unbroken rule by the Umayyads, which comes to an end in 1000 AD. So I'm going to move on to now looking at the civilizational aspects of the legacy of the Muslims and the Arabs in Spain. So what we have to remember is that education was very much given an amazing deal of importance as far as the Umayyads were actually concerned. So this is very much based on the Quranic, the very first verse in the Quran, chapter 96, verse 1, recite in the name of thy Lord. That the first verse that Gabriel or Jibrail through God actually asked Muhammad to actually utter those words at the age of 40, which meant that the Prophet Muhammad received the mantle of prophethood. So for the Umayyads, promoting education, being able to read and write was one of the top priorities, to have citizens that could actually read and write and actually contribute towards the intellectual prosperity of Andalusia. And also you had a fledgling Jewish population that actually were generally looked after well by the Muslims. Yes, there were issues such as the Battle of Granada, such as the incident in Granada in 1085, where a number of Jews actually passed away. But generally, Jews, Christian, Muslims were able to share in the intellectual heritage, take part in the in terms of cultural exchanges of ideas, of religious knowledge, cultural knowledge, that actually made the society more prosperous and more cohesive, especially when we look at the 700 years of rule. And also in Islamic Spain, the literacy rates were a lot higher in comparison to Europe, because the Umayyads actually focused their attention on enabling citizens to be able to read and write, promoting this idea of acquiring knowledge, reading different books containing knowledge from the arts, the humanities, and the sciences. And also the Umayyads, even though they had been defeated resoundingly by the Abbasids in 750, so despite the fact there was a political rivalry, you had two caliphs running different parts of the Islamic territories, from Spain to to India. For example, what you have is that even though there was a political rivalry, a military rivalry, from an intellectual perspective, in terms of creating a cultural knowledge economy, the Umayyads and the Abbasids had very good relations, that they sent scholars from Cordoba to Baghdad, Baghdad to Cordoba, and both cities had fantastic libraries that were actually built from scratch that housed hundreds and thousands of books. So Cordoba had significant libraries that actually housed thousands of books. Many of those books were unfortunately destroyed in the 16th century by the Catholics. A lot of these books were completely destroyed forever. So they say at least about 30 or 40% of the books were actually destroyed. They've been lost forever, 200 years after the Muslims left Spain in 1492. And also, one of the many academics fondly remember or talk about Abdul Rahman III. So Abdul Rahman III was one of the last Umayyad caliphs in Spain in 909 AD. That he was regarded as being the most open, tolerant caliph in Islamic history. That he actually fostered, encouraged relations between Jews, Christians, and Muslims. He had a real love for knowledge. He had, he actually pumped in a lot of resources into actually having books housed in libraries. So no expense was spared in terms of the building of educational establishments and libraries, because Abdul Rahman III wanted Cordoba to be bigger than Baghdad. The Abbasids wanted Baghdad to be bigger than Cordoba. So what you find is that this friendly rivalry from an intellectual perspective allowed both empires to actually complement one another in quite a unique fashion, despite the fact that they had military and also political differences. So just continuing on this theme of the knowledge economy. So what we find is that we have been looking at knowledge and philosophy under Umayyad Spain. So Averroes, or who's known as Ibn Rushd using the Arabic language. So Averroes is a Latinized name for Ibn Rushd. That he is regarded as being the father of secular thought in Europe. So Averroes very much came under pressure from the traditional religious orthodoxy known as the ulama, who were quite displeased with Averroes arguing for secularism. But Averroes actually saw that religion was causing more problems for minorities in a majority country. That Averroes was trying to argue that Christians and Jews would be disadvantaged by having to abide by detailed emphasis on Sharia law. So Averroes was arguing that there should be a law in the country that very much actually provides for the rights, respects the freedoms of religious minorities. So what he was arguing is that the government doesn't actually interfere in the day-to-day lives of the people. So whether you're a Christian, you're a Jew, or you're a Muslim, you are free to basically wear what you want, eat what you want, whatever belief that you want. The state will not interfere. However, that was much to the annoyance of the ulama, who or the religious scholars within Islam, who actually wanted everyone to conform to the rudimentary elements of the Sharia or Islamic law. So secularism as a concept was born in Islamic Spain, very much as a system that's been adopted by most countries around the world today, especially in the West. We look at America, the United Kingdom, that secularism is the system by which the country is actually governed. The government does not interfere in the private lives of individuals. As long as those private individuals abide by the laws of the country, they are free to dress, eat, believe in what they want, whether they want to have a religion or not. It's down to each and every individual. Just carrying on looking at Abdul Rahman III. Abdul Rahman III has been received positively by academics in recent times, because he was seen as a man who actually was very fond of the dissemination of knowledge. He created libraries housing books belonging to the arts, the humanities, the sciences, and also his successor Al-Mustansir or Al-Hakam II went ahead and built a purpose-built university to allow scholars to actually provide their research, engage in high-level teaching, and also disseminate knowledge to students who actually wanted to enter the various professions linked to the arts, the humanities, and the sciences. And also, it was no coincidence that Cordoba very much became one of the world's leading centers of medicine and philosophical debate, because you had universities, you had substantial libraries that actually created a research environment, allowing people to come from all over the world scholars to actually exchange their findings, publish books, publish what we would call journal articles today, very much trying to actually establish new discoveries or build upon knowledge that existed for many millennia in connection to the sciences and the arts and the humanities. However, as I was saying at the beginning of my talk, Islamic Spain was characterized by certain periods where you had certain dynasties that very much were more overtly interested in the promotion of the Sharia than others. So the Umayyads did not ram Islamic thought or Sharia down anybody's throat. However, you had certain rulers like Al-Mansur, who was the prime equivalent of a prime minister, the Hajib, under the auspices of Hisham II. He took a very hard line in terms of the promotion of secular knowledge in Islamic Spain. So there was a time where Al-Mansur very much disapproved of lay persons and people actually studying astronomy and logic, namely because he felt that many of the Muslims may lose their religious identity. They may basically stop believing in their faith, potentially become agnostic or atheist. So he saw the promotion of non-Islamic subjects as very much a threat to the religious identity of the Muslims in Spain. So again, Islamic Spain, it wasn't I can't say there was it was fantastic for everybody during those 700 years. There were times where certain minorities came under a lot of oppression, were actually, unfortunately, people were actually killed. People, found themselves in great difficulty. But that is basically Islamic Spain in a nutshell, where you actually have competing influences having different philosophies and ideas in terms of how to govern a community in Spain during those 700 years. So you had the good times that were actually mixed with the not so good times as well. I'm just going to ask our audience, does anyone know who this particular handsome individual is? Any guesses?
Please do tell us in the chat if you recognize this.
Safwan, you're not on the money this time, unfortunately. But good try. Getting close, Ibn Sina. There is an Ibn, but it's a different Ibn. I think Vito saying no, give us a clue. Ibn Arabi getting hot, getting warmer, Safwan. But not quite there. You got the Ibn right. 10 more seconds. Ibn Rushd. No, I think nearly there. Very warm. Hina. I don't expect anybody to know this.
I think you'd better tell us.
Okay, unless you've been on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Right. Right, so it's Ibn Zuhr. I don't know if anybody's heard of Ibn Zuhr or the Latinized name Avenzoar. So Avenzoar, or Ibn Zuhr using the Arabic name, was one of the earliest known experimental surgeons. So until now, surgery was very much a underdeveloped area, or didn't actually become a particular discipline as far as medicine is concerned until the arrival of Ibn Zuhr. So in the 12th century, he was the one who played a pivotal role in terms of actually using empiricism. So what we mean by empiricism is using the naked eye in order to observe natural phenomena, whether it's human beings, whether it's animals, whether it's plants. So he actually used empiricism or using experiments as a way of trying to basically find effective methods of carrying out surgery on human beings. But Ibn Zuhr, because he was a very intelligent man for his time and he was quite revolutionary in terms of what he did, before he actually let anybody loose or himself loose on a particular patient in terms of carrying out operations, he actually engaged in animal testing. So he actually carried out any sort of procedures that he thought of, or he actually devised. He actually carried out experiments on animals. I mean, obviously, animal rights campaigners would be aghast at that if they were listening to this particular talk now. But this is the truth in terms of the fact that Ibn Zuhr actually used animals to see whether he was able to actually able to conduct this surgery in a successful manner. So animals were actually used, and then basically those methods were successful. Then they would actually these techniques were used on humans. Also, dissections, postmortems today are actually used when the natural cause of death cannot be ascertained. So what we have is that these particular methods of actually conducting postmortems, Ibn Zuhr is credited with actually developing these methods, and also dissections of animals as well in order to study the internal structure of animals. So Ibn Zuhr also established surgery as an independent discipline of medicine. So he created a particular course for future surgeons. So they had to. So any budding surgeons, anybody wanted to actually do surgery on human beings, they had to do a course like a medicine degree, get qualified, then be supervised, and then actually once they were competent, be allowed to actually perform those operations. Also, Ibn Zuhr conducted the roles of a general practitioner. Actually wrote up the manual for a GP. Today we go to our GP for illness. If we're ill, prescribes us with gives us a prescription to buy medicine or to get medicine, or basically refers us to the hospital. So the actual job descriptions or job specs of a surgeon and general practitioner, Ibn Zuhr is credited with actually writing those what we call manuals today in terms of outlining the jobs and the responsibilities of a surgeon and a GP. Has anything surprised you so far? I think we're conscious. I think I've run over time, so I'm just trying to get people to interact. So if there's any quick questions anybody wants to ask so far in terms of first time, absolutely. Can you please tell us what surprised you so far? Quickly, 10 seconds, because I'm conscious of time. Ibn Zuhr, yes. Very few people know about Ibn Zuhr. Ibn Zuhr, yes. Something new you learned today?
And also the comment on the screens, the amazing medicine, amazing that it went that far at that point in history.
Yes. Yeah. University of Cordoba, yes. Right, I'm just going to move on now. I'm sorry, but if there's any questions at the end, then I will be happy to basically answer them because I'm just conscious of time. Am I okay for time, Olivia?
Yes, but we still want to finish by 4 o'clock, so we'll go through the next bit fairly quickly.
Right, so moving on to medicine and psychology in Islamic Spain. So Abul Qasim, or the Latinized name Abul Qasis, he also played an integral part in terms of developing surgery and taking it to new, actually breaking boundaries. So he actually spent a lot of time in terms of actually creating diagrams of equipment that he actually wanted to use in surgery. So he's credited with actually devising the technical designs for instruments such as the ligature, the surgical rod, which is still used in neurosurgical neurosurgery today, and even operations that are conducted. Because, for example, epilepsy, some people have to have operations on the brain in terms of trying to basically reduce seizures on fits. So again, neurosurgery is something that's basically very dynamic field, a very intelligent and clever people are in. So Abul Qasis, he was the one who actually designed and created instruments that are even used in operating theaters today. Ibn Zuhr also gave the first accurate descriptions of many neurological disorders such as meningitis, intracranial thrombopolitis, a bit of a mouthful, but that basically refers to the inflammation of the vein, and also mediastinal germ cell tumors, which basically is connected to cancerous cells in the body. So again, there was a lot of detailed knowledge actually discovered about complex health issues relating to the veins, also cancerous cells in the body. And that was quite remarkable because you didn't have computers, you didn't have multi-million-pound labs, especially in Islamic Spain. So it's quite remarkable that without the use of technology, that so much knowledge was discovered in terms of how the human body works, why certain people are well, why certain people are not. I'm going to come on to Maimonides in a moment, Viro. So Averroes very much also suggested the existence of Parkinson's disease. Muhammad Ali, who was the greatest boxer of all time, he was one of the most famous people who actually had Parkinson's disease as a result of the trauma to the brain because of his boxing career, where he received so many blows to the head. So Averroes very much proposed the existence of Parkinson's disease. Today, many people are familiar with this. Also, Maimonides, yes, he was Jewish, Jewish theologian, philosopher, very clever individual. He also was a polymath, meaning that he actually had substantial research expertise in the arts, humanities, and sciences, that he overlapped both fields. He wrote a considerable amount in terms of the reason why neuropsychiatric disorders exist, what the symptoms, and also how those particular disorders should be treated in the field of medicine. And he also described rabies as well. So if you're unfortunate to be bitten by a dog, people can contract rabies. Some people unfortunately do die even today. So rabies was a prevalent disease, especially during the medieval period. So just moving on to civil infrastructure in Islamic Spain. So the Muslims and the Arabs very much saw water as a vital resource in terms of supplying a much needed commodity to the towns and cities, because without water, people can't survive, let alone animals or even plants. So the Muslims and the Arabs very much invested a lot of time in terms of creating aquifers, water systems, dams in order to store water. You had reservoirs, and also these canals were actually dug out, connecting towns and cities with water. So what you have is that many towns and cities were only able to organically grow due to the provision of water through the canal system. Today we have Yorkshire Water actually providing us water through pipes. Literally, you had canals that were actually dug out into the ground, that were actually supplying water in order for crops to be grown in the fields. So again, many of these canal systems are even used in Europe today. Sicily in Italy was ruled by the Muslims once upon a time, by the Fatimids in the 9th century. So you have a lot of European countries that were actually ruled by the Muslims still using this technology even today. And also when the Spaniards created their own empire in the 15th century, the new Americas, we look at Brazil, we look at Central America, South America, we see a lot of this technology that the Arabs and the Muslims left in Spain was actually transferred to the new Americas from the 15th century onwards. Cordoba was quite unique in terms of the advancement, in terms of what we would describe as a modern city, where you had water systems carrying clean water from home to home. You had a sewage system that was actually dug underground in order to get rid of the waste. So yes, I'll leave you 2 minutes. So what we have is that Cordoba was very much a modern city that actually had a sewage system that was you were able to get rid of the sewage to ensure that there was no prevalence of any disease. Whereas Europe, for example, very much you had sewage, you had waste in the streets. That meant a lot of people actually became ill and died unnecessarily of many diseases. And finally, looking at street lamps in terms of providing safety and security for citizens at night. In Cordoba, you had the creation of street lamps in order to provide safety for the residents, and also refuse collections were conducted on a weekly basis, taking away litter from households. Right, I'll hand over to you, Olivia, now.
Thank much, Abdul. It's just such a fascinating subject that we could do a much longer session on this, as you can probably tell.
Yeah.
I think what we'll do, I hope you've really enjoyed that bit of an introduction into Islamic Spain. Rather than pausing for questions at this point for Abdul and possibly overrunning, can we hand over to Dr. Samar Al-Afandi, who's going to tell us a little bit about the actual degree in Arabic, Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies which this content is drawn from, and then we can combine questions about the programme or more general questions on the session for Abdul at the end. So I'll hand over to you now, Samar. Hello, Samar, are you ready to begin? We seem to have lost Samar for a moment. Hi, do you want to unmute yourself, Samar? I hope we have you set up in the correct way.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, yes.
All right, because I tried earlier, it didn't work. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Hello, everyone. My name is Samar Al-Afandi, and I am the program manager. First of all, I would like to welcome you and thank you for your interest in our program, Arabic, Middle Eastern, and Islamic Studies. I will take you through an overview of the program, and I'm happy to take questions during the presentation. I know we've got a very short time. So why study this program? As the title shows, the program covers 3 main subjects. Arabic is one of the fastest growing languages in the world, spoken by over 300 million people. Middle Eastern Studies is in demand as a result of the political and cultural changes in the Middle East and North Africa. Study of Islam is a growing area as it teaches the faith role in the 21st century and beyond. This pathway is taught over 1 year full-time or 2 years part-time. The part-time program is taught 2 days a week, providing flexibility for those with work and family commitments to obtain a degree from a prestigious university. The full-time program is taught over 3 to 4 days a week, depending on the chosen degree destination. On completion, you may progress into one of the following degrees offered by the Department of Arabic, Islamic, and Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Leeds. As you can see, these degrees are Islamic Studies and Middle Eastern Studies. These programs take 3 years, which include the pathway year. Arabic and Islamic Studies and Arabic and Middle Eastern Studies are 4-year courses, as they include the year abroad. To gain entry to the program, you need 3 A-levels at grade C or above, GCSEs in English language and maths at grade C4 or above are also required. We will provide matriculation tests for mature students, those over 21 years of age, who do not possess these qualifications. The curriculum of the program covers a wide range of subjects. Some are compulsory and others are optional, depending on the chosen degree program. The compulsory modules are academic development through the study of the Abrahamic faith, which introduces students to key academic skills and provides an appreciation of the main theological concepts within Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The key texts in Middle Eastern religions provides an in-depth analysis of the development of the key concepts found in the religious text of the Middle East and how they influenced societies from the past to the present day. Islamic history and civilization, this looks at the achievements of the Arab and Muslims during the golden age of Islam from the 7th to the 14th century, which we've had just a sample of it looking at Islamic Spain. Besides the compulsory modules, we have to study another 3 modules from this list, depending on your chosen degree program. We have, as you can see, Arabic, which allows students to develop Arabic language skills from scratch. And these other modules which we need to choose from. And I'm not going into details because I can see the time is running short. These are some of our past graduates. Happy on the graduation day. Some past students have gone into postgraduate study. For example, one student began her PhD last September after completing her master's, with some others going into teaching and a wide range of careers in different sectors like banking, translation, and business. Here are some quotes from graduates stating what they believe they gained from their studies with us. I'll leave you with it. The teaching team includes myself, Dr. Abdel Basit, and Ms. Sajda Khan. And finally, if you have any question, I'm happy to answer. Okay, do you have any questions?
Thank you very much, Samar.
Hello?
Sorry, that was me talking without my
Right.
mic switched on. Sorry about that. That was a really good overview of the programme, Samar. Thank you for that. We've had some questions while you've been speaking, and I've been trying to answer some of them. One of them was, can you, if you don't speak Arabic at all, can you join the programme? Vero, I think you've just rejoined us, and this is your question. So, Samar, do you want to answer that one for us?
Yeah, of course. This program designed for people with no previous knowledge of the language. So we start with them with the alphabet, sound, and then, of course, take them to higher levels.
Thank you. And we've also had a question from Safwan about whether the course offers a career path into Islamic history. And as far as I know, people can pursue a research career or a teaching career if they decide to go in that direction after their degree. And many have done in the past, haven't they, through postgraduate study?
Yes, that's right. Yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Thank you. And just something that I wanted to add, I think today's audience, all of you as participants, have given us a really good example of how broad and diverse the programme itself is in terms of people's prior experience and knowledge. Some people may have a lot of knowledge when they come to the programme because of the way that they've been brought up and maybe education through mosque or elsewhere. Others will be complete beginners, and the course is designed to be inclusive and relevant to whatever your starting point might be, isn't it, Samar?
Yeah, absolutely.
So has anyone else got any more questions before we sign off? Yes, we have a question here, Samar, about the entry requirements are GCSEs and A-levels or matriculation tests. So do you want to clarify?
Yeah, the matriculation tests are offered for mature students. That means the age of 21 and above. So we offer them instead of the GCSEs, these matriculation tests. And they don't have to have A-levels or the GCSEs in that case.
Yeah, so for mature students, basically, we're trying to offer a more flexible entry for people who, but yeah, rather than the standard age students coming on. Okay, well, I think we'd like to say thank you very much to Samar and to Abdul for a very interesting session. I've just got a couple of things to take you through before we all finish. I'd like to thank all of you as well for participating so much, for all your excellent feedback. I think we're about to